We have with us today Professor Helen Herrman, who has been the president of the World Psychiatric Association from 2017 to 2020. She is a professor of psychiatry at the Oregon and the Centre for Youth Mental Health, the University of Melbourne, Australia. She is the director of the WHO Collaborating Centre in Mental Health at Melbourne and is a former professor and director of psychiatry at St. Vincent's Health, Melbourne. She has been the former secondment and acting regional advisor in mental health for the WHO Western Pacific Regional Office in Manila. She was the president of the International Association of Women's Mental Health and the president of the Pacific Rim College of Psychiatrists. She was appointed officer of the Order of Australia. Good morning, madam. Welcome to the series of Meet the WPA Leaders, a series where the history of WPA will be put together from the personal experiences of the past presidents of WPA. Professor Herrman, you have served the WPA as a past president from 2017 to 2020. Please, if you share with us your experiences during those 3 years as the world leader.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate the initiative and the work that you'll be doing. Well, this period of working as WPA President was a real highlight personally, as you might imagine, and in particular, it was a privilege to work with psychiatrists from all around the world and the leaders of the psychiatric associations and with all the partners that we work with other intergovernmental organizations, with national organizations, non-government organizations, and in particular the groups of people with lived experience and their families that we need to work with closely.
Thank you for the details. Madam, as we realize, this post as the president carries with it an immense responsibility along with many opportunities and challenges. We would like to hear from you, specifically the opportunities and the challenges that you had during your 3 years.
Yes, well, thank you. Well, it certainly felt a responsibility. So there's a mixture of challenge and opportunity and pleasure and privilege in doing that. And I think the opportunity there is to lead a number of actions that can have an influence on the way psychiatry is practiced and the way that the profession of psychiatry can influence the way that mental health is advanced around the world. And one of the things that I was most interested to do in my term, together with all our colleagues, was to understand the way that we as a profession can work best with other groups. How do we ensure that psychiatry does have a real influence on psychiatry globally, on the way it's practiced in countries around the world, and how different groups in the large societies, the smaller societies, can help each other in what they're doing and can understand the regional differences, the differences nationally, and learn from each other in sharing that. And I think there were 3 particular areas of interest. One was to be inclusive and encourage respect for and engagement with the people with lived experience of mental ill health and their carers. And WPA, in fact, established an advisory council of these people and very good colleagues from organizations and individuals from different parts of the world have joined us in that advisory council as an important initiative. And that was based on some work that a task force initiated under the leadership of Professor Mario Mai 10 years earlier in looking at recommendations for best practice in working with service users and family carers. And those were recommendations we created for the international mental health community. And those, in fact, are now part of the WPA Code of Ethics. And I'm very pleased to say that during the term of my presidency, the Standing Committee on Research and Ethics completed the work of maybe 15 years of previous committees and under previous presidents as well, of bringing this code of ethics, a universal code of ethics, to fruition. And all of these products can be found, all of these important documents are on our WPA website, as well as there are records of these in World Psychiatry articles as well. And the other important point of inclusion is in the way that women in psychiatry are recognized and promoted, that we now have a clear understanding that psychiatry has more and more women within its ranks. And we've made a preliminary report of a survey conducted in the last few years of the member societies of who are psychiatrists around the world, what age groups they are, what genders, what sort of training they've had. And it's clear that particularly in some parts of the world, that women are now in the majority in the profession. And we've recognized that in WPA by making sure that there are women speakers in equal proportion to men speakers in all parts of our congresses. And of course, women are part of our task forces and committees and leadership in WPA in more and more regards now as we go forward. And that was something I was very keen to promote during my period. And I believe people have noticed the difference. The second, or the next area of work that was very important in my period of office, and I was very keen to promote, was that of human rights and quality of care in psychiatry. And that was, first of all, the code of ethics I've mentioned was an important part, making sure that that was completed and was approved by the General Assembly at last October of the association. And we also initiated a task force on implementing alternatives to coercion in mental health care. And we had a position paper adopted by the same General Assembly last October, which takes a very practical, very pragmatic view. It says there are very difficult discussions about what are the competing human rights involved in coercion in mental health care. But we understand that everybody agrees that there is too much coercion in mental health care around the world. And there's plenty of evidence of ways forward, and we are working with member societies to promote those and encourage people to look at the call to action and the position paper that was created and adopted. And we have also been very much encouraged to consider how psychiatrists work with communities and respond to adversity and to emergencies. Now, in my period of office, we had the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic that encouraged us to get the member societies together to help each other and to consider ways to provide assistance ranging from personal protective equipment to support and teaching for people engaged in adolescent mental health, to creating a mental health plan for the country. And this work continues. It's really provided us with a good framework based on earlier work, but has enabled us to use also the modern communications and technologies that we now have. And we were also able to really encourage and to think through the ways that psychiatrists can be trained and supported to gain expertise in working with communities in adversity who may not otherwise obtain mental health care. How do we strengthen community action as well with the support and advice of the mental health professionals?
That was a reflection of 3 years of very intensive work, covering diverse aspects and working with incredibly diverse organizations. Professor Herrman, when you took office, what were your mission and vision for WPA?
Yes, well, thank you. My overarching view was that psychiatry, we were part of global health and part of community development as well. That we as psychiatrists are essential members of the healthcare team and essential partners in community development, so that there's no health without mental health, and there's no development without, meaning social and economic development without health and mental health either. And the way that I think member societies around the world are learning to adapt training and techniques, perhaps taking a lot from emergency and disaster psychiatry and applying it to working with communities worldwide, making sure that the specific expertise and the unique contribution of psychiatry is there, and that we can contribute to the prevention and the treatment, and particularly the early intervention in mental ill health, and as well provide advice and assistance in promoting mental health in communities worldwide.
Thank you, ma'am. The objectives you laid out at the beginning clearly were instrumental in successfully delivering the exhaustive work that you've carried out in your tenure. During your presidential years, the world witnessed the COVID pandemic, which clearly had a very big impact internationally. Madam, how did you find your role leading the profession from an international perspective during these 3 years, an occasion that happens 1 in 100 years?
Well, first of all, it was a matter of experiencing from afar, if you like, the anguish of many people. Many people in our profession had to face moral dilemmas, to work while exhausted, to negotiate on behalf of the rights and well-being of their patients. And this, watching people in the countries that were affected, hearing their accounts, talking to people, reading about what they were doing, this was both it produces pain for all of us, but it also produced a sense of determination and urgency that was shared in the leadership of WPA. And I believe we did our best to harness and to get people to work together to provide at least what we could in the way of moral support to each other, sharing of resources and ideas, and the harnessing of expertise. We had a number of working groups together, working on e-mental health, on the development of mental health services in a pandemic, and in the provision of whatever practical support that could be mustered. And the way that we realized that we were not alone, but we realized that the opportunities provided by the technology, by the communication that we're using now, allowed us to do things that we would never have been able to consider before. So working with people who could assist us in developing these channels of communication and working together, and working with the people of goodwill around the world in the leadership of our member societies. I believe we were able to keep a sense of the profession responding during this crisis. We were also in the midst of, we worked together with other groups like the World Medical Association and the intergovernmental organisations to promote a sense of shared enterprise, that psychiatry was not on its own. As mentioned earlier, it's part of healthcare, part of social development, and we were aiming to be as active as we could in that way.
We are very grateful to WPA for the various ways you have extended your support as an organization during the peak waves of the pandemic, especially to India. Madam, women psychiatrists like myself have been inspired by highly acclaimed leaders of the world like you. How do you think the needs and opportunities of our profession have changed over the decades that you have been associated with this specialty?
Well, I think the position of women in the profession has, I believe, has gradually changed. It still hasn't changed sufficiently. We still need to make sure that the presence of women in the profession is reflected in senior roles and leadership, and that we encourage the medical students and the young women in our communities to become engaged in psychiatry, and to make this a positive choice, that this is a profession, a noble profession that needs people, needs men, it needs women, it needs people from all parts of each society and all nations to contribute. And it's a profession that's uniquely challenging with its the different roles that psychiatrists have that have been very well described by my predecessors and by people all over. But the roles that psychiatrists have, particularly those that involve them working with others, the people I've mentioned, in people in other professions in healthcare, in other parts of our communities, working in schools, working with midwives, working with city planners, and working in criminal justice systems, that this is a a wonderful profession for the women in our profession as well as for the men. And people sometimes say that women are important because of the needs of women in our communities. I believe that's true as well, that women psychiatrists tend to have a greater focus on important topics like perinatal mental health, an area that's of extraordinary importance and becoming more and more recognized in that way. But of course, that can also become a stereotype or a caricature. And I think we want to avoid that women are involved in all parts of our profession. And men, of course, have brought wonderful developments in these more women-centered areas as well. So what we need is for the roles and the contributions of each person to be respected. And the most difficult thing for women medical students of my generation was that women were often regarded as very unusual, and people were somewhat cautious about what they could do or could be asked to do. But I think we are gradually overcoming that women are it's being recognized that it's a very much an individual matter what people can do or would like to do. So while I think we have come some distance, it's partly because of social changes as various countries, as well as professional changes, there's a great deal more we can actively do in the profession to support that, and WPA is doing what it can in the area of congresses and encouraging women to become part of the leadership.
Professor Herrman, listening to your thoughts about the noble aspects of our profession, I'm clearly of the view that we need men and women equally to deliver our services with care. I'm more convinced now that with your gentle healing words, you have drawn the picture of Florence Nightingale of psychiatry. I can visualize you as one of the leaders in women's psychiatry internationally, who clearly inspires many like myself. What will be your recommendation for further development of WPA for the association to perform effectively, overcoming the challenges of the upcoming years?
Well, I think it's don't be daunted, and we've had a lot of soul searching about psychiatry as a profession. How do we gain recruits? How do we prosper? I think we have a marvelous future, and we, particularly if we think of our future as embedded with the healthcare systems and the social care systems in our communities. And the advancement of mental health depends a good deal on how we can present it, how possibilities we can reveal, and the way that our expertise is used, so that the way we present it and present ourselves to our communities.
Madam, with your vast experience of working in diverse situations, I would like you to tell us, what were the burning issue of stigma in mental health? With this issue, how can WPA best engage communities, including people who have lived experience and their families, so that we can together defeat stigma?
Yes, well, I think that's certainly a challenge for us, but the more that we encourage others in the healthcare system, for a start, to regard psychiatry as a critical part of the work, the more it becomes part of universal healthcare, and is embraced by health professionals around the world, we can move out that way. That the more we cast off our own views of ourselves as rather strange or peculiar, but that we are doing a job that nobody else can do, it takes a great deal of application and time and resource for each person to become a psychiatrist. And the community, the countries invest in that. So that I think we then, in terms of the way we present what is mental health, what is mental ill health, what are the various contributions to that, to the state of mental health and the state of mental ill health and how that can be changed, the more that the rest of the community will be able to see how this is part of life and needs to be tackled. I think an important part of the work with universal healthcare is including centrally the idea of early intervention, that we are not there to simply to look at a situation when people have finally come to seek help when the situation is long-standing or very grave, that people realize that mental ill health is like ill health of any type, that some people get better, some people have intermittent problems, and some people have long-standing and severe conditions, and that there is a great deal we can do for people in each of those groups. So I'm perhaps emphasizing what we can do ourselves rather than and how we can bring the rest of our communities along with us.
Professor Herrman, thank you, Madam, for the words of wisdom that you have kindly shared with us today. Finally, I would like to ask you, what will be your message for the younger generation?
All right, thank you. Well, I would say go ahead with and embrace the new possibilities with vitality, with excitement. I think this pandemic has shown us that the possibilities of technology, as well as the approaches to working with communities, can all strengthen a person-centered approach to psychiatry, that they're not likely to, we need, of course, to ensure that that remains the case. But with all of the advances in neuroscience, as well as in technology and social psychiatry, and psychological sciences, there's a great sense of possibility ahead. And I'd also like to thank you and the Indian Psychiatric Society for what you've done with WPA over this period.
Professor Herrman, thank you for the inspiring thoughts, for your talk today, and especially for your key message to the future generations of psychiatrists. We are indeed very grateful to you for your time, and we wish you the very best in the years to come. Thank you.